Hello, I'm Joel Blackford with Beth Hassett Sabbath Fellowship. The building is locked like it's been for 2 years. You can call the number that you see on the screen if you'd like to talk. I do the philosophy of eschatology, what you need to know, our reality, our existence. I try to tie together prophecy with the Bible, with history, with news, and other things like that. I try not to be disparate. We are Beth Hassett Sabbath Fellowship. The building is locked, but we still fellowship on. I still meet with people. I'm telling you to watch wheat prices, things like that, because it's starting to go through the roof. I think the third horseman is riding, and I'm going to give you my evidence of that. And where's the timing in Revelation? Because people are talking about it. So I have a friend named John Haller. I recommend his podcasts all the time. He does a nice job. He tends to do the news, and he does a lot of the news, and he does a great job of that. He doesn't tend to give you his opinions. He shares a few, but he's pretty reluctant because he's an attorney, and so if he can't prove it, he's not going to state it. That's how attorneys work. I don't operate under that assumption. I give you my opinions. I share more information. I take risks. I do. That's fine. So John was out on 10/30 of 2022, recording his weekly broadcast, and he said, "I think the seals will open, but there'll be like an upward progression of what so basically they increase. The problem is, based on how I think the seals open, they're quiet. Okay." When you open up a seal on a document, 7 seals, it's quiet. Okay, nobody would probably notice it, and so he's kind of correct that they get larger over time, no doubt about it. But then, who determines when and how the 7 seals open? And what if they're wrong? I'm asking that. But then at 41.00 of his recording, John Haller asks if it's time to discuss the 7 seals. His people would get together and talk about it, but I don't think they want to test out prophecies. And that's how you kind of know what's going on. So basically, I'm saying I've made the call. I'm saying 2012, the third horseman started riding, and the signs are there. And so he's saying the signs of the fourth seal and the third seal are there. It's just that he's not willing to make the call, and he would want to get together with other people. Well, I don't tend to get together with other people on this because they come in with preconceived notions that the seals can't open until the Great Tribulation. Well, then there's really no point in discussing it. Or, one of the more brilliant guys out there is Doug Hamp. Well, he thinks the seals and rain over the top of the trumpets, which rain over the top of the trumpets. I mean, the bowls. And so, no, it's linear. Sorry, it's written linear. It's linear. There are narrative breaks, but that doesn't break down the cadence. And and yeah, I have Lutheran friends, obviously, and they tell me about the chiastic structure. Who cares? Everything in the Bible is chiastically structured. That doesn't negate anything else in the Bible. So, okay, so what's going on? What's coming next? Right now, really, according to The Economist, it's going to get bad. It's a recession, then it'll go into a depression, and we're noticing it in flour. And that's why I'm saying watch wheat. This is from a local bakery, and this is their post saying, here's what things used to cost, here's what they cost now. And it's only a year apart, and it's brutal. And so your baked goods cost a lot right now. Well, that's part of the third seal. So we'll discuss that. We'll get to that in a minute. So the other thing is we have 8 billion people, and we don't seem to want to feed them anymore. I think they want to starve most of the people out. But these people are going to be hungry. Look at India, 1.41 billion. Wow. China is 1.45 billion, but keep in mind, China is doing their best to make sure that they drop down to 600 million by 2050. One-child families, which means that it's generally a boy, which means there's no girls, and you're not going to have any babies without girls, so China's falling apart. India has a few problems with too many boys because they did selective abortions, but they have the population and they are making babies. So who will drive it? Probably not the United States. We seem to be falling apart in terms of population, but we are going to be at 8 billion. I think we are there right now. So I'm recording this Halloween evening. Okay. And then look at this. Plus 80% of the United States is in megadrought as of 2022. This is according to Politico. So it's going to be horrible. There are going to be more fires. There's going to be more issues with food, and these are signs of the third seal. So 80% of continental U.S. is experiencing unusually dry conditions or full-on drought. Okay, so and this is NOAA, so it is a good source. Rivers are drying up. The rains aren't happening. That's one of the curses from Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28. He says, I will give you the rains and the water if you keep my commandments. Well, we aren't keeping his commandments, so guess what you get? Okay, so what are we trying to do here? I'm trying to give you the philosophy of the end of days. I'm trying to give you the Bible straight up, give you prophecy that I can vet, and then give you the news and see if it harmonizes. My first guy that I cite always right now is David Wilkerson from 1973. I don't care if he accidentally predicted some dates in the 2000s. And he was partially right, too. He predicted 9/11. So I don't care, because this is 1973 that we're talking about. Worldwide recession starting in Germany, then spreading to Japan, then finally to the US. That is happening, people. Okay, corporations are going bankrupt. Many churches are going to go into bankruptcy. Nature having labor pains. Absolutely, we're seeing that. Supernatural signs. Absolutely. Worldwide natural disasters. Absolutely. Major earthquakes are getting worse. And then worldwide famine, especially in China, India, and Russia. Okay, we'll see. I'm not so sure about the Russia angle, but we'll see. And then pornographic filth, and then rebellion in the homes, and persecution madness. These things are happening. And it happens to be 50 years ago, which is very interesting. He's a prophet. Okay, so let's see what's happening. Nord Stream was damaged, blown up by somebody in both spots, and that's one and two. And so now Germany has unprecedented signal that natural gas flows won't resume this winter. So really, the only way Germany can get energy is to dig coal again, or keep their nukes open, which they don't really want to do, or have America ship over natural gas in the LNG containers. And none of that's going to be cheap, people. Okay, so widespread food scarcity hits Europe this winter and well into 2023. Food scarcity strikes America in 2023. Lack of fertilizer. Governments initiate price controls on food items. That's not going to work. Worsening scarcity and widespread civil unrest. You'll see a lot more of that. Governments then introduce rationing as a means of control. So this is this article that I'm citing. They'll introduce the control, implement mass starvation. Germany will be first. Finally, governments criminalize preppers and start pushing stories of hoarders who are causing everyone else to starve. So they'll just steal from the preppers. There you go. Here's another article. This is Yahoo Finance. JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon, says recession in 6 to 9 months. First, it's going to hit Europe, and they're really already in recession, and it's going to be much worse than we ever thought. But then, likely, the U.S. will hit recession in 6 to 9 months. That matches up with Wilkerson, people. Okay, so S&P could fall by another 20%. I'd say 80%. But I'm not making any economic prognostications. Okay, but it's going to be an economic hurricane. So Diamond is correct. It's going to happen. Well, we are given a reprieve because God loved our parents and grandparents. That's why. Another sign of the third seal, third horseman, deindustrialization of Europe in 2023. Yeah, the plants are closing down. They can't get energy at proper pricing, so that means it's better to just close down the plant and put people out of work. So the largest chemical manufacturer, which is BASF, is going to close down their largest plant, and they'll probably shift everything over to China. So Goldman Sachs is warning of the deindustrialization of Europe, and it's happening. It's happening. They're going to have to close down major manufacturing plants. Aluminum's going to be closed down. Other metals will be closed down. Anything that takes energy to process is going to be closed down. So they're going to be barely heating their homes, and they'll have to go out and cut down trees. So they're going to clear cut their forests. Here comes open revolt. Reeling Europe lashes out at the Fed for bringing us into a world recession. So the American Fed is causing this. Yeah, that and Germany sat there and laughed at Trump when Trump said, "You will die if you count on Russia for gas and oil and things like that." And they just laughed at him. Well, now they're not laughing. It's going to be an ugly winter. So these articles are matching up with the third seal. Whether you want to call it or not, it's happening. Now, Saudis and Russia agreed to oil cuts. So when they cut oil production, that means prices go through the roof. So that's more inflation. Inflation matches up with the third seal. I'll cover that in a minute. Don't worry. The third seal, so you can see that. But the U.S.-Saudi relationship is unrecoverable. Biden snubbed the MBS from Mohammed bin Salman from Saudi Arabia. He just doesn't know how to treat people properly. You know, if he would stop sniffing little girls and start playing properly with world leaders, but he can't respect them. He just can't. He thinks he's some kind of a, I don't know, world leader. He thinks he's brilliant. He's not. He's an idiot. So war is coming at some point in time. Hell on earth. Food lows worldwide. So this is from, I'm blanking on the article. It's the AP. Okay, so UN food chief warns of hell on earth food lows. Yeah. So this is David Beasley, and food pricing problem or crushing inflation, permanent state of humanitarian emergency, widest gap ever between the wealthy and the poor, and that's third seal. You'll read it in a minute here. Perfect storm on top of a perfect storm, Beasley said. Fertilizer crisis we're facing now with droughts, and we're facing a food pricing problem in 2022. This created havoc around the world. That is the third seal. Okay, but it's also a little bit of the fourth seal because people will die. It's like a black swan event. Okay, and so this is from Nicholas Taleb, and it really talks about step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and it's amazing how things can happen within this black swan theory, which is you're going to have just a massive failure upon failure upon failure, and then everything falls apart. And so that is the black swan. And you'll have a food availability problem that contributes to the black swan. You'll have probably 50 million people in 45 countries knocking on famine's door. Famine, starvation, destabilization. That's more fourth seal. Okay, but they work together. I mean, once you're done with the third seal, you're moving towards the fourth seal. And so oh goodness, it's horrible. So it is hell on earth, food lows worldwide, and the UN is talking about it finally. So I'd like to cover my opinions, and remember, only one of them matches up with something prophetic. But the first horseman, I believe, is the fall of Western civilization. Why do I think it's West? Because it says that in Zechariah 6, which matches with Revelation 6. So the white horseman, it comes after, which is acharei in the Hebrew, which is west. Okay, so the collapse of Western civilization has been happening, I believe, since 1967, but it's really picked up steam here since 2012, and so different citations of it here. Obviously, different books have been written on the collapse of Western civilization. The second seal, according to my reckoning, is going to be the Bush time frame, when 9/11 occurred, and then Bush said, let's go invade a bunch of countries in the Middle East that happen to be east of Israel, and so Iraq and Kuwait in part in terms of working with them, but Syria obviously is east, northeast, and then Afghanistan and other countries. So Bush said, I will not exonerate Saddam Hussein from blame. I will mobilize our troops and jets to Kuwait and then Persian Gulf, and I will be prepared for total war. The message is amico among coming to kick your rear end, Saddam. So yeah, Bush talked big, and he kicked off all of these wars that we're in right now. So I blame Bush for seal number 2. And because who knows how the planes attacked 9/11? Who knows the story behind that? But we do know that people died, and we do know that Bush started wars, and we don't know if Bush wanted those wars. His dad sure wanted them, so they got it, and Cheney did too. And Cheney's a wicked, evil man. So the third horseman, food inflation and insecurities. Europe facing potential famine in wake of Nord Stream attack. So yeah, Michael Yon is really a brilliant thinker on this. Longtime war correspondent, former U.S. Army Green Beret, planned destruction of Western world. So that matches up with the first seal, that it's leading to global famine, which is basically the third and the fourth seals. Okay, globalists are systematically destroying the energy resilience of our countries. They won't pull it out. Jan said, if you don't have energy, you're not going to have food. And it's the globalists that are doing this. And it's like they want to do this, which is ridiculous. Moving on, the third horseman. Now, that is, according to me, it started during the summer of 2012 by a young man that came to our congregation over in Hudson, Wisconsin, named Chris. And he said, well, I'll quote it when I get to the next slide here. So, but when he opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, come, and I looked, and behold, a black horse, and its rider had a pair of scales. That means judgment, people. When you see that in the Bible, when you see the pair of scales, that's God's way of saying, you're going to be judged. and I heard what seemed a voice in the midst of the four living creatures saying, a quart of wheat for a day's wages, and do not harm the oil or the wine. And so it's supposed to be wheat and barley. That's actually a poor misprint of it, but basically that's what's going to occur. So according to this young man, there would be a storm on 1031 of 12, and that was during the false Sukkot of Heshvan, which is the time that we're going to be starting on election day this year. So just notice the blood moon eclipse of November 8th and the election, and notice and compare that to 2012, when on the time of the full moon of Heshvan, 14 or 15 of 2012, we had Hurricane Sandy that just invaded Wall Street and blew it up good. And because Wall Street is about greed, it's not about God, it's about greed. So the third seal opens. So here's what I described as occurring during that time frame. So according to Chris, the third seal opened during the summer of 2012. I was preparing to publish my book. I was praying to God every day to guide me. Little did I know he was sending a man with a prophecy. Just before the fall festivals, and a man named Chris visited my church in Hudson, Wisconsin. I introduced myself, asked him why I was attending. He said God asked me to deliver a message to the pastor and the elders. I was not a pastor at that point in time. Chris wouldn't tell me the message because I was not the pastor or the elder or anything like that. I was just a guy that attended there. I was an eschatologist. Finally, after citing that we were both authors with a certain publishing company out of Oklahoma, with the same, yeah, that company, he said, okay, fine. I broke him down. He said, there will be a storm this fall after Sukkot, but before the end of October, its signs will be snow and a broom. And then it occurred. And so during that time frame, during that fall Sukkot, which is found in 1 Kings 12, you'll find that the storm started out on October 31st, Hurricane Sandy. Then it whipped up, and finally by the end, on Hoshana Rabbah of the fall Sukkot, you had, and that means the big day, the great day. That's the water libation day during the true Sukkot. And so there will be snow in a broom, and there was snow in a broom. And then I said, hey, anything else? He said, yeah, the third seal opened this summer. So he delivered the message. The pastor and the elders are wonderful people, love them dearly. They rejected the message because they're not really looking for prophecies like this. But that was what Chris was asked to do. So then I have this friend named Mark that came to me afterwards, and he said, do you want to know what this means? And I said, what? Because I had already published my book. So if you read my book, don't read my book. It's horrible. I need to republish it, edit it quite a bit. But the main point is, Mark said, you published it wrong. You don't even understand that Jeroboam and Rehoboam were not brothers, And so, and I didn't think about that. I just thought about publishing my book. So he said, basically it was 1 Kings 12. And that Mark had been asked by God to start reading that years earlier, about 10 years earlier. And so it had to do with the northern kingdom splitting from the southern kingdom. It talks about kingdoms dividing. And really, you could see it from 2012 on with Obama and other people, that they were trying to divide America. And they've done an excellent job. You can see that in Twitter right now. So Halloween's Eve, Hurricane Sandy swept across the financial district of New York like a storm from God. And there's Sukkot, which is celebrated a month before, which was fine. But this was the Sukkot, the anti-God Sukkot of 1 Kings 12. So then we had the divided election on 11/6. Then on 11/7, we had that big day, which was the snow and the broom came through, and it was all part of the same storm. And so that snowstorm, ravaged the East Coast and America's financial headquarters. So basically, don't celebrate Halloween, and keep in mind that the next time that we're going to have this fall Sukkot starting is right after a blood moon eclipse, which is very interesting. So just be aware of it. I'm not predicting anything. I'm just saying that would be an interesting date to watch and see what's going on. So I'm going to always say that 2012 was a dividing point for our nation and our world. Obama started to divide our country, and the West has really hastened their death spiral. You can say that many of the pagans thought that the world would end in December 21st of 2012. It didn't, obviously, but things changed. And then the Pope was supposed to resign back in 2012, and he did. But then he made it official in 2013. So it is interesting. This is an article by the New Gatekeepers, Michael Lind, and he said between 2010 and 2012, American culture changed. Within a few years, what had been obscure concepts in politicized university departments like gender studies and ethnic studies became orthodoxy, not only in academic halls, but also in corporations, banks, and professional associations like the American Bar and medical associations. In 2020, you have unisex bathrooms in public schools that are necessary to accommodate non-binary students. And it's just all of these things happened when Obama kicked it off in 2016, suddenly cutting off federal funding if you don't obey. So then here it is for the Pope, resigns in 2012, exits in 2013. It was predicted in Petrus Romanus by Chris Putnam and Tom Horn. Chris did the research, Tom Horn had the prophecy, and it actually happened the way Tom Horn saw it in his dreams. And so I used to talk to Chris Putnam before he died. I like the guy. We got along well. But, he's dead now. And I really don't have contact with Tom Horn, so I can't tell you anything about what he's thinking about. The only thing that he's really working on is Apophis for 2029, and that's a long time from now. So the main thing is he predicted, based on St. Malachi's prophecy and some French prophecy, that there would be a pope resigning in 2012, and he actually did announce it then in 2013, and that we would get Peter the Roman, the final pope, which would be um, Pope Francis right now. And I'm a fan of Roman Catholics, but not of the Pope, and not a fan of some of his assistants. They seem to be ungodly people, and Malachi Martin agrees with me. I'm citing him basically from 1997, the interviews on Art Bell. So the third seal, I wanted to point out one more time a little bit about it. When he opened the third seal, I heard the chayot, the one of the beasts, saying, "Come and see." And I saw Hine is kind of like, you need to see this. This is important. A sus shakor, which is a black horse. The one sitting on it had a pair of scales, and he's citing Zechariah 6:2, which I think is absolutely correct. And so that talks about the four horsemen there. And I heard a voice, a call in the midst of the Arba, the four chayot, living beings, saying, "A quart of wheat for a denarius, and a shloshla of quarts of barley for a denarius, and the shemen oil and the yain wine you shall not harm." Now, the not harm there is edekesis, which is in the Hebrew is avonim, which is, it's like saying lo avonim, which is don't willfully sin and harm others by withholding food and oil and wine. But the wealthy are doing that right now. They're not affected at all. So avonim is willful sins. Okay, there are kata type sins that are just ritual impurity, and it's not that big of a deal. But then there are willful and there are pasha sins. So avonim, willful, and pasha, which would be rebellious sins. And God has no prescription for forgiveness for those types of things. He has only Yeshua. So if you look at Micah 7:18, you'll see these things listed out in the text, in the Hebrew text. God only has a prescription of you repent and he forgives you for that, but you better repent tirelessly. Okay, so you can see from Ezekiel 4:16 what willful sins looks like. So that's Adikaya, and so you can see, so that they will anxiously weigh out bread to eat, and horrified ration water to drink. Finally, the lack of bread and water, you will stare at each other in shock, wasting away because of their guilt. That's avonim. So I literally can connect all of these verses together. Well, I can connect Zechariah 6 with Ezekiel 4:16, with Revelation 6:6, all together by the same basic Hebrew words. Okay, so there's a green cancer going on right now, and it's warping the food inflation. Winter wheat areas are in drought, 74% across America. So that's wheat. So watch wheat as much as possible. And the fertilizer shortage is really going to hurt American farmers, and especially right now Europe farmers. So these are bright green lies. They're going to destroy. They're going to cause death. Okay, destroy crops first, but then cause death. And this is the greenies, Greta Thunberg and other idiots. This is the problem right now. And so we listen to them, and then we don't plant our crops, and then we don't fertilize them, and then we die. That's what happens. You freeze and die. Third seal, food scarcities, inflation, depopulation. Markets are expecting the Federal Reserve to save them. It's not going to happen. The Federal Reserve has been printing up paper for years, and it's going to run out of time on that. The soaring dollar is emerging as one more driver of food insecurity for Africa and Asia. So the soaring dollar leaves food piled up in ports as world hunger grows. If the food gets there and suddenly there's inflation, then the people can't afford to buy the food. So then they starve and the food sits there and does nothing. So it's horrific right now, people. Worthless cash to buy expensive food. So once again, the plunge, this isn't a rinky-dink stock. It's the British pound that's dropping fast. Britain is going to have problems after Germany. Germany's going to be first, okay? And so even the Pope is talking about this right now. Global gloom, world markets plunge to start a week as global currency crash hits max pain and beyond. And this isn't that long ago. This is only a month ago. So we're seeing global gloom. That's what's happening. Third seal, worldwide food wars. So who suffers? So really, this is Mike Adams that's talking about it. But first, India bans wheat flour exports. So that means there's even less wheat going around. So what I want to prove to you is wheat. We don't talk about barley much because people don't eat that much barley. But here's why it's a really big deal as we enter full-on food wars. Top wheat producers are being hit across the board. China. They're also the number one consumer, but they're also the number one exporter, and they're being hit, and they may not export. India, now exports are banned. Russia, number one. Oh, Russia is the number one exporter. The Black Sea shipping. You know what's going on with Ukraine. They're not even letting Ukraine export. USA, terrible season. Drought. France, drought has severely impacted yields. Canada, spotty harvest so far. Germany, drought has severely impacted yields. Estimate 50%. There's Ukraine, number 10. In these nations, the rest of the world upon their bread. And so whatever the third seal is talking about, you're going to see it occurring in the next few years as wheat is a major issue. And that's biblical, people. Okay, so third seal, inflation devastating for typical family. No veggies for you. Food inflation surges as eggs, pasta, vegetables, and grains get even more expensive. So Mike Adams is warning that if natural gas supplies were not abundant in Europe and to BASF, this chemical producer that makes fertilizer, that then fertilizer production would plummet and there would not be enough fertilizer to grow the crops to feed the world. So we're going to see horrible inflation on butter and eggs and fresh and dried vegetables, grains, just 30.4% for the year. And Biden is claiming there's no inflation. I mean, think about that. You know, all of these prices are going through the roof. So third seal, daily economic horror stories. So basically, I'm saying from 2012 forward, it's been getting worse. But now 80% of the U.S. is facing troubling dry conditions, latest supply chain crisis. So the rivers are going dry. That means the barges don't float. The barges are the cheapest way to move grains around. People are going to starve. Okay, so keep that in mind. Soybeans are going to be wasted on these barges that get stuck, and it's going to be bad. Okay, so continuing on, German EU food crisis. Bureaucrats don't care. Global food crisis. 50% crop loss likely due to drought. German farmers say. Yeah, horrible news. So this is from Christian Ice Age farmer. Energy in the Netherlands. Nobody can survive. More than 1 million households in the Netherlands are struggling to pay energy bills that have doubled or tripled in the recent months. They're going to have to cut down trees. Back to the old days. Europeans panic, buy firewood and stoves. And the biggest corporate victim of Europe's energy crisis may be the $93 billion chemical giant whose flagship plant uses as much gas as the whole country of Switzerland. But they also produce a lot of chemicals that people need. So that's going to block all sorts of other things that you need because chemicals are needed to produce food. So will the EU freeze? Yeah, they'll freeze and starve to death in 2023. German producers warn of food shortages. Now this is RT talking about it because they really want to get back at Germany for prospering the war in Ukraine against Russia. So then sharp rise in Russian food exports reported. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch these things happen. Once again, this is RT in both cases. EU will freeze and starve to death in 2023, if not, yeah, in 2023. Europe appetite for LNG. So LNG is liquid natural gas. So they have to freeze it to liquefy it and then ship it in these crazy containers. And it's a very expensive way to ship. And the funny thing is, the people that want to ship it this way are the American gas companies. So it's really kind of pathetic how this is all working out. It makes it easier to demonize the Americans on this. Okay, so where are we? We're in the birth pangs. We're in the third seal. I mean, I think I proved enough of that today. We're moving towards the fourth seal. The tribulation will occur later on at some point in time. I have no idea. It could be 10, 20, 30 years away. It could be 2 years away. It's not starting this fall. Trust me. We're really right now in Heshvan, and we would know if we were moving along. So it's at least a year or two off, but could be 10, 20 years off. Then the Great Tribulation after that. The fourth horseman carries 4 death plagues. That happens after the third seal, and it's depopulation. So the Ramphea sword really is linked to mass migrations. Keep that in mind. That will be a huge factor over time. Limo, so Ramphea is that big sword. It's a 2-edged sword that is the word of God. Then Limo is famine, crop failures. We're seeing that. I pointed that out today. Thanatos is death. That's coming. Therion is animals and pandemics and biological warfare coming. So once again, the election's coming up, and so Nord Stream is sabotaged, no energy. Crop failure, no fertilizer, no food. Inflation woes, food and basics unaffordable. War woes worldwide, more deaths. Biotech and big tech merge to create diseases and mark of the beast. And you assume we're not watching the fourth seal of Fourth Horseman ride. So this will be the first election day, U.S. election day, with a blood moon eclipse. It'll be interesting, people. Get your garments clean. You get into the wedding with clean garments. You show up naked, you get thrown out. You show up with dirty garments, you get thrown out. Keep your garments clean. This is a really important time to have your garments clean. So be blessed. Thank you very much for your time. We'll talk to you next week.